Sometimes the thing that destroys a family isn't a fight, it's an old phone in a kitchen drawer. I'm Ray, and tonight's story is for anyone who knows that the deepest heartbreak usually happens in silence. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss stories that help us see family, marriage, and the hard truths of life a little more clearly. Now, let's get into it.
There are things in life that sit still for so long you start believing they're dead. An old phone, a 12-year marriage, a childhood wound I thought I'd already buried. And if you've lived long enough to understand that a marriage doesn't die overnight, but dies inch by inch in silence, then you'll understand why what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about betrayal. It's the story of the moment a man watched his whole life change color just because he picked up an old phone. My name is Andrew. I'm 50 years old. My wife, Laura, is 40. Our daughter, Evelyn, is 7. I used to think that if my family ever fell apart, there'd be yelling, slammed doors, tears, some kind of warning. I never imagined the thing that would kill my marriage would be an old iPhone 13 sitting in the kitchen drawer, covered in so much dust I'd almost forgotten it even existed. That day felt completely ordinary. Laura said maybe it was time for Evelyn to have her first phone. Not a new one, just her old iPhone 13, the one that had been sitting in the drawer for ages. She asked me to clean it up, wipe the old data, reset it for our girl. I remember exactly how I felt in that moment. Normal, completely normal. Just a dad doing one small thing for his daughter. No gut feeling, no warning signs, nothing. I sat at the dining table, plugged the phone in, and powered it on. The screen lit up slowly, like something waking from a long sleep. I started deleting old photos, checking apps, signing out of a few accounts. Then I saw a text thread from 2023. I tapped on it, and within seconds, I knew my life had just taken a hard turn. It wasn't vague. It wasn't the kind of message you can lie to yourself about and say it was just joking around, just a little line crossing. No, it was so blatant it made me sick. Sexual messages, pictures,
Words between two people who had gone way past every line a marriage is supposed to have. Laura had slept with a coworker, while I was working 16 hours a day, while my health was going downhill, while I was busting my ass trying to provide for my family and telling myself things would get better. People like to think betrayal makes you go crazy right away. It didn't work like that for me. My first reaction was numbness. I just sat there staring at the screen, feeling like all the blood had drained out of my body. I couldn't really hear anything around me anymore. The kitchen was the same. The lights were still yellow. The clock was still ticking. But everything felt like it had been pulled away from me behind a thick sheet of glass. The worst part wasn't just that she slept with someone else. The worst part was that I thought we were good. No, more than good. I honestly believed our marriage was in the best season it had ever been in. Over the past 3 years, I'd lost 40 kilos after gastric sleeve surgery. I changed how I ate, how I lived, how I saw myself. I worked on myself, trying to become a better husband, a better father, a better man. And in my head, all of that was making this family stronger. I thought we were happy. Turns out, I was the only one living in that happiness. Those best 3 years of our marriage now look like 3 years I spent living in the dark while she lived with a secret. That night, I put the phone away in the storage room. I didn't do that because I was noble. I did it because I was scared. Scared that if I kept that thing in front of me one more minute, I'd storm back into the house and do something stupid. I'd seen people lose their minds over betrayal before. That night, I understood exactly how real that feeling is. I decided not to drink. I needed to stay clear-headed. I needed to keep myself from slipping over the edge. And then I had to sit down at the dinner table across from my wife like nothing had happened. That was one of the worst dinners of my life. Evelyn sat between us, her little legs swinging under the chair, chattering away about school. Laura put food on her plate, asked if she wanted more vegetables, wiped the corner of her mouth like any gentle, everyday mother would. Every now and then, she'd turn to me and ask something totally normal, totally ordinary, like whether I wanted more potatoes or how work had gone that day. And I sat there, staring at the woman I had just seen in raw, sexual messages with another man minutes earlier. I had to nod, had to swallow every bite like my throat wasn't full of broken glass, had to keep my face calm, keep my voice steady, keep my eyes from giving anything away, while inside it felt like something in me was being ripped apart, layer by layer. That kind of pain isn't like anger. It's worse. It's the feeling of sitting right next to betrayal, watching it spoon soup into your child's bowl, watching it check on you in a sweet wife's voice, and still having to play the role of a normal husband so that little 7-year-old girl doesn't realize her home just collapsed. Some pain doesn't make noise. It just sits right there at the dinner table and forces you to smile. I didn't sleep that night, or the next one, or the next several after that. I moved through the following days like a corpse with a job. I still got up early, still answered emails, still drove Evelyn to school, still listened to her stories, still said good night, like always. But inside me, there was a war going on. I had already been through this once before. Before Laura, I had another relationship that also ended because of betrayal. I had been crystal clear with her about my first marriage, about what betrayal did to me, about how much I hated it, and that there was one line I would never forgive. Cheating. I didn't say it just once. Laura knew damn well, knew exactly what the consequences would be if she betrayed me. And she did it anyway. Back then, I told myself something very clearly. If life ever dragged me through this kind of hell again, I wouldn't survive it. I was done with that kind of pain. I would never let myself end up there again. But it's easy to say that when you're young. Once you have a child, none of your decisions belong only to you anymore. That's the part nobody sees. People think when you discover an affair, you either blow up, get divorced, or forgive. Nobody talks much about the days in between, the days when you know the truth but still have to wait until the child in the house is asleep before you even dare breathe too hard. The days when your mind runs through 1,000 different scenarios, but your child's face is standing at the end of every single one of them. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was also a son who grew up in a family wrecked by divorce. That kind of memory never really leaves you. The day my parents divorced, they didn't just separate from each other. They dragged me down with them. They fought in front of me, talked trash about each other to me, forced me into the middle. One asked who I wanted to live with. The other cried and told me I had to understand. I was too young, but old enough to remember what it felt like when the house I lived in suddenly turned into a war zone. I remember doors slamming. I remember things being said that no child should ever hear. I remember going to sleep afraid that when I woke up the next morning, I'd have to choose sides all over again. My parents didn't just divorce each other. They turned me into part of the divorce. And it damaged me in a way so deep that even now, I still haven't fully gotten over it. That's why, in the days after I found that phone, I wrestled with myself harder than I ever had at any point in my life. There were moments I wanted to get right in her face, throw every piece of evidence on the table, and ask why. There were moments I wanted to screenshot everything, send it to everybody, and make her pay that very night. There were times the rage got so bad I had to go stand outside in the cold for hours just to make sure I wouldn't do something I could never take back. But then I think about Evelyn. I think about her face if she ever had to hear her parents screaming in the kind of voices children never forget. I think about her growing up in a house where every door shutting sounded like a gunshot. I think about her being pulled back and forth between two adults too busy hurting each other to remember there was a child standing right there. I didn't want my daughter to have the childhood I had. I didn't want her carrying the same damage I did. After days of fighting with myself, I came to the decision that, at the time, I believed was the right one. I was going to divorce Laura, but I was going to do it quietly. No drama, no telling people, no dragging mutual friends into it, no turning Evelyn into a witness to this collapse. Then one night, I did what I had probably been building up the nerve to do for days. I waited until Evelyn was fast asleep. I stood outside her bedroom door for a long time, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, looking at her small, peaceful face on the pillow. Only when I was sure she was deeply asleep did I step away. I went into the bedroom and woke Laura up. She opened her eyes, still groggy, and asked what was going on. I told her we needed to talk, right now. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't shove the phone in her face right away. I just sat down, looked at her, and said in the calmest voice I could manage that I knew everything. I knew about the messages. I knew about the coworker. And I had thought long and hard about it. I told her the marriage was over. I was filing for divorce. I still remember Laura's face in that moment. It wasn't the face of someone who'd been wrongly accused. It was the face of someone jolted awake by the truth. She was so shocked she could barely speak for the first few seconds. Then she started crying, begging, pleading, saying she was wrong, saying it was a mistake, saying we could fix it, saying that for Evelyn, for the family, for 12 years of marriage, I should give her another chance. But the more I listened, the colder I got. Not because I stopped hurting, but because I was hurting too much to soften. I reminded her of what she had always known. I had told her about how my first marriage was destroyed by betrayal. I had made it clear that cheating was the one thing I would never accept. I had told her long ago, long before she decided to do this, that if it ever happened, I would leave. Laura knew the consequences beforehand, and she chose to do it anyway. She cried harder, tried to touch my hand, tried to say more, tried to pull me back towards some kind of hope, but I didn't change. In the end, somewhere between tears and silence, we came to an agreement. A quiet divorce for our daughter's sake. No public announcement yet. No big blow-up. No making Evelyn the center of a family explosion. We would finish the legal process first, and only after that would we make it public. I thought I was doing the mature thing. I thought I was protecting my daughter. I thought if I could endure enough, swallow enough, arrange everything quietly enough, then my little girl would get hurt the least. That was my biggest mistake, but I didn't know that yet. While I was silently taking that beating, things started slipping out of my hands in ways I never saw coming. One afternoon, I picked Evelyn up after school. She got in the car, buckled her seatbelt, sat quietly for a second, then said in the most casual, innocent voice, the kind only kids have, "Dad, Mom said sometimes grown-ups stop loving each other because one person changes." I remember my hand tightening around the steering wheel. I didn't turn and look at her right away. I was scared that if she saw my eyes in that moment, she'd know something was very wrong. Then she kept going, still in that soft little voice, like she was just repeating something she'd heard adults say in the kitchen. "Mom said maybe you've been unhappy for a long time." My whole body just dropped. I stayed quiet to protect my child, and Laura, in that same silence, had already started planting a different story in our daughter's head. I didn't say anything. I just asked Evelyn how school was, whether she had homework, whether she was hungry. I heard my own voice like it belonged to somebody else. That night, after she went to sleep, I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat down on the tile floor. Cheating was already betrayal. But using a child as a place to hide your lies, that was a different kind of cruelty. And still, I said nothing. I kept trying to believe that if I stayed calm, if I kept everything from blowing wide open, there was still some path left that would hurt her less. Then something else came up. At first, I told myself maybe it had all happened back in 2023. Something old, a stain from the past I had just accidentally touched. I still wouldn't forgive it, but at least I could tell myself it was over. But then one night, while I was going back through what was left on that phone, I found something tiny, just a trace, a scrap of information that should have meant nothing if I hadn't already known what I knew. But once you know, the smallest things cut like knives. a location, a leftover trace just enough to make me understand it hadn't died in 2023 the way I had tried to believe. It had gone on longer than I thought, maybe on and off, maybe quietly, maybe covered up really well. But it wasn't one single slip in the past and then the end of it. That was when the pain changed color. If before I was hurting because I had been betrayed, now I was hurting because I realized an entire stretch of my life I used to remember with tenderness had been soaked through with lies. The days I thought we were getting closer again. The moments I looked at her and thought, maybe things really are getting better. The family dinners, the nights watching TV, the vacations, the hugs, the smiles. All of it suddenly looked suspicious. I started wondering if anything in those last 3 years had been real at all. And right when I was still trying to keep the truth locked inside a box to protect my daughter, Laura had already started doing the opposite out in the open. Because I didn't tell anyone, didn't go public, didn't defend myself. But she did. With our mutual friends, she started playing the victim. Not in an obvious way, not enough to make anyone suspicious right away, just enough for the story to take root. She said the marriage was falling apart because I had changed, because I had grown cold, because I had become hard to be around, because I made the atmosphere in the house heavy, because I wasn't the husband I used to be. She made it all sound like she had been silently suffering through me for a long time. And me, because I had chosen silence, I gave those lies room to breathe. Our mutual friends started acting different. Some texted less. Some turned colder. Some said things in circles that sounded like advice but were really judgment. Obviously said, men don't always know how to appreciate family until it's too late. Somebody else said, women usually endure a lot before they walk away. Some of them looked at me like they had the whole story figured out, even though none of them knew a damn thing. I was the one who got betrayed, but in their eyes, I was starting to look like the bad guy. And that was when I realized, silence doesn't always protect your child. Sometimes, it just gives the liar more time to rewrite the truth. Even then, I still tried to keep everything from exploding. Until that night. A small party, mutual friends, warm atmosphere, laughter, glasses clinking, food spread out on the table. The kind of evening I used to think was proof I had a good life. Evelyn was there early in the evening. She ran around, laughed, talked, hugged everybody. Laura was so perfect it made me want to throw up. She smiled softly, touched my hand lightly when somebody cracked a joke, asked if I wanted more food, stood beside me like the perfect wife, as if there was nothing between us but years of peace and stability. And our friends, the ones who didn't know or thought they knew, looked at the two of us and smiled the way people smile at a solid couple. One of them even said right in front of me, "Honestly, you two are one of those rare couples." Everybody laughed. I laughed too. Or at least I think my face managed to do something close to it. Later that night, Evelyn fell asleep. I carried her into a bedroom at the host's house and tucked her in. I stood there looking at her for a long time. Her hair spread across the pillow. Her peaceful face. Innocent. Oblivious to the wreckage the adults were standing outside trying to cover up with laughter. Then I walked back out. And when I stepped back into the room where everyone was sitting, I saw Laura under that warm yellow light, drink in hand, laughing with a group of friends, her face so calm it was chilling. She was still performing the role of the poor woman who had tried everything to save her family. And me, with my own silence, I had helped keep that stage standing. And just like that, the memories hit me. I saw my younger self, a little boy standing in the hallway, listening to his parents scream like they were tearing the house apart. I heard the words that had lived inside me for years. I remembered what it felt like to be turned into a battlefield. I remembered I had sworn I would never let my daughter grow up inside the lies of grown people. And suddenly I understood something. I had been wrong to think silence was protecting my child. No, my silence had not protected her from dishonesty. It had only protected the person who betrayed me long enough for her to turn me into the guilty one in front of everyone else. I stood there in a room full of mutual friends, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. There was no way back now. I didn't have the strength to keep pretending. I set my glass down. The whole table was still talking and laughing. Then I stood up. At first, nobody noticed, not until I said my wife's name. Laura turned around. Everybody else did too. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the table. My voice was so calm it surprised even me. I said, in so many words, that I had stayed quiet all this time because I thought it was the best way to protect my daughter. I didn't want to turn friends into sides. I didn't want to drag anybody into our marriage. But that silence had been used to twist the truth. Then I said this marriage had not fallen apart because I changed, not because I stopped valuing family, and definitely not because Laura was some victim. I said I had found the messages from 2023 on her old iPhone 13. Sexual messages. Pictures. Proof that she had slept with a coworker while I was working 16 hours a day and struggling with my health. The room went dead silent. I looked straight at her and said I had tried to believe it was old history until I found signs that showed it didn't stop there. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but I had already taken out my phone. I didn't need to say much more. I just needed to show them the proof. The things I had kept. The things I had refused to use to humiliate her while I was still trying to keep this family from blowing apart in front of my daughter. I put the evidence out right there, not for revenge, but to end a lie. I remember Laura's face in that moment. No more smile, no more calm mask, no more victim role. Just a woman being ripped open by the truth in the middle of a room full of people she had fed a version of the story that made her look good. Nobody said anything for the first few seconds. Then the whole atmosphere in the room changed. Our friends looked at me, then at her, then back at the evidence. That kind of silence is always heavier than screaming. Because once the truth is sitting in the middle of the room, there's nowhere left to hide behind politeness. I don't remember how much longer I stood there. I just remember one strange feeling. Not victory, not relief, just exhaustion. Bone-deep exhaustion. 12 years of marriage came to an end not with a decent conversation, not with a confession, but with an old phone in a kitchen drawer and a moment when I had no choice but to save the truth of my own life in front of everybody. I used to think the worst pain was being betrayed. Then I thought the worst pain was having to stay silent for my child. After that, I thought the worst pain was letting the whole world believe I was the one who ruined this marriage. But in the end, I understood this. The worst pain is realizing that some truths, if you don't stand up and say them out loud, will let lies grow big enough to swallow your dignity whole. And one day, they'll swallow your child's memory of her parents, too. I don't know how much of anything got repaired after that night. I don't know how our friends will see us now, or how Evelyn will understand any of this one day. I only know one thing. I tried to stay silent so my daughter wouldn't grow up in the middle of a war. But it turns out, sometimes telling the truth isn't what starts a war. Sometimes, it's the only way to end one that's been going on in silence for far too long.